My husband laughed with his family, calling me just a housewife who plays with computers. 24 hours later, his jaw dropped when my little hobby sold for $60 million, and his startup was begging to partner with my company. The chiming of crystal wine glasses echoed through the vaulted ceiling of my in-laws' Hampton summer home. I watched as Tanner raised his glass, his confident smile never reaching his eyes. 11 years of marriage had taught me to recognize that particular smile, the one that appeared whenever he was about to diminish me in front of others. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. To family, he announced, looking pointedly at his father, whose approval he'd been seeking since long before I met him, and to my Eloise, who keeps our home running so perfectly while I build next-gen solutions. I maintained my practiced smile, the one I'd perfected over more than a decade of marriage. The weight of my phone in the pocket of my summer dress felt suddenly heavier. The notification I'd received just 20 minutes ago, an email confirming tomorrow's acquisition meeting, was still sending vibrations of anticipation through my body. You know, Tanner continued, turning to his brother Jordan, whose venture capital firm had funded half the tech startups in Boston. Ellie's actually gotten quite good at this computer stuff I've been teaching her. She even made a little app. Jordan raised an eyebrow, glancing at me with what might have been genuine interest, but Tanner continued before I could speak. Nothing serious, just one of those daily planning things that housewives use. What do you call it, honey? Life sorted or something? Life sync, I corrected quietly, taking a measured sip of water. The irony wasn't lost on me that he couldn't even remember the name of the application that had just received a $60 million acquisition offer from Vertex Technologies. Right, Tanner waved dismissively. Life sync. Cute name. Shows she's been listening during our dinner conversations at least. His mother Grace laughed politely while his father Will barely registered the conversation, too busy checking stock prices on his phone. Only Claire, Jordan's wife, shot me a questioning look across the elaborate table setting. As an architectural engineer, she was familiar with being the only professional woman in rooms full of men who assumed her role was decorative. You know what makes a successful tech company? Tanner's voice grew louder as he warmed to his favorite topic, understanding how to scale user acquisition while maintaining core functionality. Right, Dad? Will finally looked up from his phone, nodding in vague agreement. That's why NextGen is projecting a $10 million valuation this quarter, Tanner continued. We understand the infrastructure needed to support enterprise-level applications, not just making pretty buttons and calendar reminders. I observed the subtle dynamics around the table. Jordan's slight wince at his brother's condescension, Claire's tightening grip on her fork, Grace's practiced obliviousness. After orchestrating countless family dinners, I'd become adept at reading the currents of tension beneath polite conversation. Actually, Jordan began, I'd be interested in seeing what Eloise has. Oh, it's nothing worth your professional attention, Tanner interrupted with a laugh. It's a hobby project, like how Mom does watercolors or Claire has her container gardening. Claire's eyebrow arched dangerously, but she remained silent. Eloise doesn't need to worry about user acquisition strategies or scalable architecture. Tanner continued, placing a hand on my shoulder with what others might mistake for affection. That's why our arrangement works so perfectly. I handle the complex business world, and she keeps our life organized. Right, sweetheart? My phone vibrated again in my pocket. Without looking, I knew it would be Erica, my COO, confirming tomorrow's final preparations. The moment I'd been working toward for 6 years was just hours away, but for now, I simply nodded and offered the expected response. You've always been better at explaining technical concepts than I am, I said. The practiced, humility sliding easily from my lips. Exactly, Tanner exclaimed, squeezing my shoulder triumphantly. Not everyone has the mind for it. Some people are better suited to supporting roles. The waiter appeared, refilling wine glasses and placing the first course before us. I watched as Tanner reached eagerly for his third glass of Bordeaux, the slight tremor in his hand barely noticeable to anyone who wasn't looking for it. But I noticed everything. To success, Tanner declared, raising his glass again. And to knowing your strengths and limitations. As Crystal clinked around the table, I smiled and raised my water glass. If anyone had been watching closely, they might have noticed the smile didn't reach my eyes. Speaking of business, Will finally engaged, turning to Tanner. How's the Patterson account coming along? They're crucial to hitting that valuation you mentioned. The Patterson Group was a mid-sized healthcare provider that had been considering NextGen's patient management system for months. What neither Tanner nor his father knew was that Patterson's CIO had been one of LifeSync's earliest enterprise clients, implementing our organizational systems across their executive team 2 years. Go! Patterson is practically closed, Tanner assured his father, the wine making him even more confident than usual. They'd be foolish to go with any other solution. Our meeting next week is just a formality. I took another sip of water, knowing that Patterson had already informed their vendors they would be transitioning all systems to LifeSync's enterprise platform as part of the Vertex acquisition. But that announcement wouldn't come until after tomorrow's press release. And what about you, Eloise? Claire asked, deliberately shifting the conversation. What's new with your app development? I felt Tanner tense beside me. These moments always made him uncomfortable, when someone treated my work as legitimate rather than as a cute hobby. Oh, it's coming along, I said carefully, just adding some new features. She's added a shopping list function, Tanner jumped in, patting my hand. Very practical for household management. What I'd actually added was an AI-driven predictive workflow system that had caught the attention of 3 major tech companies and sparked a bidding war that had ended with Vertex's offer. The shopping list was merely the consumer-facing feature that disguised the complex machine learning algorithms operating beneath the surface. Don't bore everyone with app talk, Tanner continued. Jordan, tell us about that new medical tech company you're funding. What was it? Some kind of diagnostic system? As Jordan launched into a description of his latest investment, I felt my phone vibrate once more. Excusing myself quietly, I stepped onto the terrace overlooking the Atlantic Ocean. The summer evening was perfect, warm with a gentle breeze carrying the salt scent of the sea. I checked my phone to find a message from Timmy, my lead developer. Final. Code review complete. All systems ready for transfer tomorrow. Vertex lawyers have approved all documentation. We're officially ready. I took a deep breath, looking out at the horizon where the darkening sky met the endless ocean. 6 years of work, of early mornings and late nights, of building a company while maintaining the fiction that I was just playing around with app development. 6 years of letting Tanner believe he was teaching me basic concepts while I scaled a company to 15 million users and built an enterprise solution that had revolutionized organizational workflow management. Tomorrow, everything would change. But tonight, I would play my part one last time. I slipped my phone back into my pocket and rejoined the family dinner, where Tanner was now explaining to everyone why women were naturally less suited to the competitive tech industry. It's not sexism, it's biology, he was saying as I took my seat. Women are wired for relationships and organizing social structures, not for the kind of aggressive innovation tech requires. Right, Dad? Will nodded sagely. That's why there aren't more female CEOs in tech. It's not prejudice, it's natural inclination. I caught Claire's eye across the table, and we shared a moment of silent understanding. Little did they know that in less than 24 hours, I would become one of the wealthiest female tech CEOs in the country, while Tanner would learn exactly what his just a housewife had been quietly building all along. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. 6 years earlier, I sat in our modest Cambridge apartment, staring at lines of code on my laptop screen while Tanner showered after his first day at Next Gen Solutions. The job was a significant step up for him, a senior development position at a promising healthcare software startup. He'd spent the entire evening describing every detail of the office, his new colleagues, and most importantly, how impressed the CEO had been with his ideas. I'd listened attentively, asked the right questions, and prepared his favorite dinner to celebrate. It was the pattern we'd established since we met in our final year at MIT. Tanner spoke. I supported. His dreams took precedence. Mine were what, exactly? That was the question I couldn't answer as I gazed at the prototype I'd been developing for months. Before meeting Tanner, I'd been at the top of my computer science cohort with 3 job offers from major tech companies. My senior project on adaptive user interfaces had won the department's Innovation Award. My professors had predicted a remarkable career ahead of me. Then came love, marriage, and the subtle, almost imperceptible shift in our dynamic. It wasn't that Tanner had forbidden me from pursuing my career, nothing so overt or recognizable. It was smaller than that. Comments about how competitive the industry was, concerns about the long hours we'd both be working, gentle suggestions that our life would be more balanced if one of us managed the home front. By the time he accepted the next-gen position, I had declined all my job offers and was working as a freelance web developer, a compromise that allowed me to contribute while maintaining the flexibility to be the supportive wife Tanner needed. The arrangement made sense at the time, or at least I'd convinced myself it did. I closed my laptop as I heard the shower turn off. The prototype, a simple organizational app I'd designed to streamline my own daily tasks, would remain my secret. For now. Not because I thought Tanner would object, but because I wasn't yet sure what it meant to me. Was it just a way to keep my skills sharp, or was it something more, a lifeline to the ambitions I'd set aside? What are you working on? Tanner appeared in the doorway, towel around his waist, hair still damp. Just updating the Wilson family's website, I replied, referring to one of my freelance clients. They want to add an online store component. Nodded absently, already moving on to more important matters. I need to prepare for tomorrow's presentation. The team's implementing a new patient tracking system, and I have some ideas to streamline the interface. As he described his plans, I found myself mentally redesigning the system he outlined, noting inefficiencies and missed opportunities in his approach. But I kept those thoughts to myself, offering encouraging nods instead of suggestions. Later that night, as Tanner slept beside me, I reopened my laptop and returned to my prototype. What had begun as a simple organizational tool was evolving, in my mind, into something more sophisticated. A system that could learn from user behavior and adapt accordingly. The kind of project I would have pursued at one of those tech companies I'd turned down. That night, LifeSync was born, not just as an app, but as my private rebellion against the life I'd settled for. Over the next few months, I established a routine. During the day, I maintained my freelance business and managed our home. In the evenings, I was the attentive wife, listening to Tanner's work stories and offering the support he needed. But in the early mornings and late nights, I built LifeSync, line by line, feature by feature. I rented a small office space using income from my freelance work, explaining it away as a need for a professional setting to meet clients. In reality, it became LifeSync headquarters. First just me, then, as the app gained its first users, a small team. Erica joined first, a former classmate who'd been working at Google but was looking for the excitement of a startup. She raised an eyebrow when I asked her to keep my involvement quiet. "Your husband doesn't know you're building a company?" she asked during our coffee meeting. "He knows I'm developing an app," I clarified. "He just doesn't know the scale of what I'm envisioning. And why is that?" Erica never shied away from direct questions. I considered my answer carefully. Because I need to figure out who I am apart from being Tanner's wife. If he knew, he'd want to help, to guide, to take over, even if he didn't mean to. This needs to succeed or fail on my terms. Erica studied me for a moment before nodding. I respect that. And from what you've shown me, this has serious potential. I'm in. With Erica handling operations, LifeSync grew from concept to reality. We launched with minimal marketing, letting the product speak for itself. The initial user base was small but enthusiastic, mostly professionals seeking better ways to organize increasingly complex lives. By the 18-month mark, we had 7 employees working from our modest consulting office, as I described it to Tanner, and over 100,000 active users. The app was generating enough revenue to cover costs, with promising growth metrics that attracted attention from angel investors. The first investment offer forced me to create a legal structure that would protect my privacy. With help from a discreet business attorney, I established a corporate entity under my maiden name and a trust structure that would shield my identity as the majority shareholder. On paper, I was merely a developer consultant to the company I actually owned. This is unusual, my attorney had commented. Most founders want recognition. I'm not most founders, I replied simply. At home, my double life required careful navigation. I attributed my increasing knowledge of tech industry trends to keeping up with things for Tanner's sake. My growing network of industry contacts were described as friends from college or connections from freelance projects. The late nights working were explained away as deadline-driven freelance work, and Tanner accepted it all without question because it fit his perception of me. Supportive wife, modestly successful freelancer, certainly not a tech entrepreneur building a potentially revolutionary product. The most difficult deception wasn't the logistical juggling, but the emotional restraint required when Tanner would explain basic business or technical concepts to me. Concepts I was actively implementing at a sophisticated level in my own company. I'd listen patiently as he described the importance of user acquisition strategies while I was in the midst of executing a growth plan that had added 1 million users in 6 months. You should consider getting a real job at some point, he suggested once as we prepared for bed. Nothing too demanding, of course. Maybe something part-time in admin at a tech company. You could leverage what you've learned from me. Maybe. Someday, I'd replied, thinking of the meeting I'd had that morning with 2 Silicon Valley investors who were valuing LifeSync at $15 million. As our user base grew to 5 million and our team expanded to 20 people, the cognitive dissonance of my 2 lives intensified. I found myself wondering what I was waiting for. Why maintain the charade? The answer was complex and perhaps not entirely logical. I needed to prove something, not to Tanner, but to myself. I needed to know that I could build something substantial, entirely on my own terms before revealing it to the world, and to my husband. The Harrison family dinner was a monthly ritual I had come to anticipate with a mixture of dread and anthropological fascination. Tonight's gathering was at Tanner's parents' primary residence, a sprawling colonial in Wellesley, with a perfectly manicured lawn that Grace Harrison inspected with the same critical eye she used to evaluate her daughters-in-law. "Eloise, dear, is that a new dress?" Grace scrutinized me as we entered, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. After 11 years, I recognized the prelude to a subtle critique. "No, I've had it for a few seasons," I replied, leaning in to accept her air kiss. "Ah, vintage is coming back, they say," she responded with a slight nod. "So practical of you to reuse." Beside me, Tanner didn't notice the exchange. He was already scanning the room for his father, like a satellite seeking its primary signal. Will Harrison had that effect on his sons, creating a gravitational pull that had shaped their lives and ambitions. Will stood by the fireplace, tumbler of scotch in hand, deep in conversation with Jordan. At 62, Will maintained the commanding, presence that had helped him build Harrison Investments from a small financial advisory firm to one of Boston's most respected wealth management companies. "There's my tech genius," Will announced as we approached, clapping Tanner on the shoulder. "Just telling Jordan about your Patterson pitch. Sounds like you've got them locked down." Tanner straightened visibly under his father's approval. "Nearly there. Their board meets next week for the final decision, but our solution is clearly superior to anything else they're considering." What neither of them knew was that Patterson's CIO had already decided against NextGen's solution after a disastrous beta implementation last month, information I had learned during a LifeSync enterprise client meeting but could never reveal. "And Eloise," Will turned to me with the distracted acknowledgement he always offered, "keeping busy with your little websites?" "Web development," Tanner corrected automatically, though inaccurately. "She's been learning some basic app development, too. Shows a knack for the simple stuff." I nodded pleasantly, accustomed to these diminishments. "Just trying to keep up with the changing technology." "Good for you," Will said, with the indulgent tone one might use with a child showing off a crayon drawing. "Always good to have hobbies." The family dynamic was painfully clear. Will at the apex, Tanner and Jordan competing for his approval, the women in peripheral supporting roles. Grace managed this hierarchy with practiced efficiency, ensuring that the men received the lion's share of attention while creating the illusion of family harmony. Claire caught my eye from across the room, raising her glass slightly in solidarity. As Jordan's wife and the only other professional woman in the family, she understood my position all too well. Despite her successful career as an architectural engineer, the Harrison family still primarily identified her as Jordan's wife and Zoe's mother. During dinner, the conversation predictably centered on business, specifically the men's business. NextGen is positioned to revolutionize healthcare management systems, Tanner explained, warming to his favorite subject. Our patient tracking module alone could increase hospital efficiency by 30%. "If you can deliver what you're promising," Jordan interjected with the skepticism that characterized the brothers' relationship. "Healthcare systems are notoriously difficult to integrate." Tanner's jaw tightened. "We've addressed the integration challenges. My team has developed proprietary middleware that bridges legacy systems." What he didn't mention, couldn't know, was that LifeSync's enterprise division had already solved this exact problem more elegantly. Our solution had been implemented in 3 major hospital systems, with demonstrable results that had caught Vertex Technologies' attention. "Your brother has always had a talent for technical solutions," Will stated, effectively ending the discussion. "That's why NextGen was smart to bring him on board." The subtext was clear. Tanner was the technical genius, Jordan the business mind, each valuable in their own sphere but always in competition. This dynamic had shaped both men, driving Tanner to prove his business acumen and Jordan to demonstrate technical knowledge, neither quite succeeding in the other's domain. "And how is your app coming along, Eloise?" Claire asked during a lull in conversation, genuine interest in her voice. "Tanner mentioned you were working on something organizational?" All eyes turned to me with varying degrees of disinterest. This was typical of Claire, creating space for the women's voices in these male-dominated discussions. Before I could answer, Tanner jumped in. "It's a clever little system, actually. Eloise has created a daily planning app, calendar, to-do lists, that sort of thing. Based on what I've learned from watching Tanner," I added with practiced humility, maintaining the narrative he expected. Tanner smiled indulgently. "I've been explaining some basic programming concepts, and she's taken to it surprisingly well. The user interface is quite intuitive, perfect for non-technical users like busy moms." The reality was significantly different. LifeSync's core technology included an adaptive AI system that learned from user behavior to optimize workflows, anticipate needs, and eliminate inefficiencies. Our enterprise version was being evaluated by Fortune 500 companies for executive productivity enhancement. The mom-friendly interface was merely our consumer-facing layer, designed to be accessible while hiding the sophisticated technology beneath. "How nice," Grace commented with the dismissive tone she reserved for women's accomplishments. "It's good to have projects that keep the mind active." "Absolutely," Will agreed, already turning back to Jordan. "Speaking of active minds, how's that medical diagnostics company performing? What was it? Macro health." And just like that, my work was dismissed, the conversation redirected to matters deemed more substantial. This pattern had become so familiar that I no longer felt the sting of it, or at least that's what I told myself. Later, as the men moved to Will's study for brandy, and Grace led Claire and me to the sitting room for coffee, I reflected on how the Harrison family dynamic had influenced my decision to keep LifeSync secret. It wasn't just about Tanner's perception of me. It was about this entire ecosystem that categorized women's work as projects and hobbies, while men pursued careers and innovations. "So tell me about this app without Tanner's interpretation," Claire said quietly, once Grace had stepped away to instruct the housekeeper about dessert. "I've been watching you all evening. There's more to this story than a simple planning app, isn't there?" I hesitated, assessing Claire's trustworthiness. We had a friendly relationship but weren't particularly close, both of us careful to maintain the peace in the Harrison family dynamics. "It's a bit more sophisticated than Tanner realizes," I admitted carefully. Claire smiled knowingly. "I suspected as much. Jordan does the same thing. Assumes I'm working on decorative facades when I'm actually engineering structural systems that keep buildings from collapsing." A moment of understanding passed between us. Two women whose capabilities were consistently underestimated by the men in their lives. "How much more sophisticated?" Claire pressed gently. I was saved from answering by Grace's return, followed shortly by the men rejoining us. But Claire's question lingered in my mind. How much more sophisticated indeed? Sophisticated enough to be valued at $60 million. Sophisticated enough to potentially disrupt Tanner's company. Sophisticated enough to completely transform how the Harrison family perceived their just-a-housewife daughter-in-law. In less than 24 hours, they would all find out, and here she is, the woman behind the successful man. Tanner's voice carried across the elegantly appointed dining room of Maison Laurent, Boston's newest exclusive restaurant. Heads turned, as he beckoned me over to a table where he sat with 4 men in expensive suits. Executives from Meridian Healthcare, the parent company of the Patterson Group. I had not planned to be here tonight. My schedule was packed with final preparations for tomorrow's acquisition announcement. But Tanner had called in a rare emergency support request, his words, not mine, insisting my presence would help soften the atmosphere for this crucial business dinner. "Gentlemen, my wife, Eloise," Tanner introduced as I approached, his hand finding the small of my back in a proprietary gesture. "She keeps everything running smoothly at home so I can focus on revolutionizing your patient management systems." I offered a polite smile to the group, noting with interest that one of the executives was Marcus Donnelly, the CIO who had implemented LifeSync's enterprise solution throughout Meridian's executive offices 6 months ago. His eyes flickered with momentary confusion before professional courtesy smoothed his features. "Lovely to meet you all," I said, taking the empty seat beside Tanner. Marcus's eyes narrowed slightly, and I knew he was trying to place me, the woman who looked like the developer he knew as E.L. Monroe, but was being introduced as the homemaker wife of NextGen's lead developer. "We were just discussing the integration challenges with legacy systems," Tanner continued, signaling the waiter for another round of drinks. "As I was explaining, NextGen's proprietary middleware creates seamless data flow between disparate platforms." I noticed Marcus shift uncomfortably in his seat. He knew, as I did, that NextGen's solution had failed spectacularly during beta testing at Patterson Memorial Hospital last month, creating data synchronization issues that had taken their IT department 2 weeks to resolve. The Patterson implementation had some unexpected challenges, the older executive, Hamilton Pierce, Meridian's CEO, noted diplomatically. Tanner waved this off. Minor configuration issues, already resolved in the latest build. This was patently untrue. The core architecture had fundamental flaws that couldn't be addressed without rebuilding significant portions of the system, something I knew from both Tanner's late-night complaints and from Meridian's internal assessment, which had been shared with LifeSync during partnership discussions. "Eloise, you look familiar," Marcus said suddenly, studying my face. "Have we met before?" I felt Tanner tense beside me. "Unlikely," he answered before I could speak. "Eloise doesn't travel in tech circles, though she's picked up enough from our dinner conversations to create a cute little planning app." He chuckled indulgently. "Show them your app, honey." There it was, the cute little app that was about to be acquired for $60 million, being used as a conversation piece to demonstrate Tanner's supportive influence on his homebody wife. I hesitated, calculating the risks and benefits of truth versus continued disguise. With the acquisition announcement less than 18 hours away, maintaining my cover seemed the prudent choice. I took out my phone and opened LifeSync, displaying the consumer interface with its clean, intuitive design. "It's just a simple organizational tool," I said modestly, watching Marcus's expression as he recognized the application that his entire executive team used daily. His eyes widened slightly, darting between me and Tanner. "LifeSync," he said, the name hanging in the air between us. "You developed LifeSync?" Tanner laughed, oblivious to the undercurrents. "Well, developed is a strong word. Eloise put together a nice user interface based on some principles I've taught her. It's basically a digital calendar with some extra features. Nothing enterprise level like what we're building at Next Gen." The other executives nodded politely, but Marcus continued to stare, clearly trying to reconcile the woman before him with what he knew about LifeSync's leadership. "We actually use LifeSync across our executive team," Marcus said carefully. "It's been remarkably effective at optimizing workflows and reducing administrative overhead." Tanner's smile faltered slightly before he recovered. "Really? Well, that's surprising, though I imagine you're using it for basic scheduling rather than complex business processes." "Actually," Marcus began, "the AI-driven workflow optimization has—" "Speaking of business processes," Tanner interrupted smoothly, "let me walk you through how Next Gen's solution addresses patient data synchronization across departments." As Tanner launched into his technical pitch, I felt my phone vibrate with an incoming message. Discreetly checking under the table, I saw a text from Erica. "Final docs signed by Vertex. Press release scheduled for 9 a.m. We're officially counting down." "Eloise, honey, could you ask the waiter for another round?" Tanner asked, not pausing his presentation. The dismissal was clear. My role at this dinner was decorative and supportive, not participatory. I signaled the waiter as requested, observing the dynamics around the table. The oldest executives, Hamilton Pierce and Robert Fulton, were listening to Tanner with polite attention. The younger VP of Operations, James Wilson, was checking his phone under the table. And Marcus continued to glance at me with barely concealed curiosity. When I returned my attention to Tanner's presentation, he was explaining the innovative nature of Next Gen's approach. The problem with current solutions is they lack the predictive intelligence to truly optimize healthcare workflows. That's where our proprietary algorithms come in. I bit my tongue, fighting the urge to point out that what he was describing as theoretical future development was already functioning in LifeSync's core technology that Marcus and his team use daily. "It sounds quite similar to functionality already available in certain platforms," Marcus noted, his eyes flicking momentarily to me. "Nothing currently on the market can do what we're developing," Tanner insisted confidently. "Trust me, I've analyzed all the competitors. Most organizational apps are simplified interfaces designed for non-technical users. Women planning family schedules, that sort of thing. He patted my hand. Like Eloise's little project. The condescension in his tone was so familiar I barely registered it anymore. But tonight it struck me with particular force, perhaps because of the imminent changes coming. Years of dismissive comments, diminishing explanations, and assumptions of limited capability coalesced in this moment, with witnesses who actually knew better. Actually, I began, a rare impulse to correct him rising to the surface. Eloise struggles with the technical aspects, Tanner continued as if I hadn't spoken, addressing Marcus directly. I've been trying to explain database structures to her for years, but some concepts are just too abstract for non-technical minds. Right, honey? I felt something shift inside me, a willingness to maintain the charade fracturing under the weight of his condescension paired with Marcus's knowing gaze. LifeSync uses a distributed NoSQL architecture with dynamic schema mapping to accommodate variable data structures across different user scenarios, I stated quietly but clearly. The predictive algorithms employ a neural network trained on anonymized user behavior patterns to optimize workflow suggestions. Silence fell over the table. Tanner stared at me, momentarily speechless before forcing a laugh. Someone's been listening to my work calls, he said to the group, squeezing my shoulder with subtle warning pressure. She picks up terminology but doesn't quite understand the concepts behind them. It's cute. I think your wife understands more than you realize, Marcus said carefully, his gaze steady on me. LifeSync's architecture is considered breakthrough in several aspects of workflow optimization. Tanner's expression hardened slightly. Well, I wouldn't go that far. It's a consumer app, not enterprise software. Actually, we're implementing the enterprise version across 3 departments next month, Hamilton Pierce interjected, looking interested in the conversation for the first time. Marcus has been singing its praises for months. The tension around the table was palpable as Tanner struggled to maintain his narrative, while the Meridian executives clearly valued the very product he was dismissing, the product I had created. Perhaps your wife could share more insights about LifeSync's development, Marcus suggested, a hint of challenge in his voice. Tanner's hand found mine under the table, squeezing with warning pressure. Eloise isn't here to talk tech. She's had a long day managing our home renovation. Let's give her a break from business talk, shall we? I'm sure she'd rather discuss something less technical. And just like that, I was dismissed again, relegated to the role of decorative supportive spouse while the men returned to serious conversation. But something had changed. The moment of truth had been forestalled, not prevented. And Marcus, Donnelly now knew, or strongly suspected, exactly who had created the software his company valued so highly. I caught his eye briefly as the conversation shifted to implementation timelines. The slight nod he gave me confirmed what I already knew. My carefully constructed separate identity was beginning to unravel, and tomorrow's announcement would complete the process, changing everything in my life, professional and personal, irrevocably. The downtown office building that housed LifeSync's headquarters wasn't particularly impressive from the outside. A renovated textile factory with exposed brick and large windows, typical of Boston's innovation district. This deliberate understatement had been my choice. Like so much in my life, the company's external appearance concealed its true nature. I pressed my hand against the biometric scanner, and the heavy security doors opened to a space that told a very different story than the one Tanner believed about my little hobby. At 11:30 p.m., most of the staff had gone home, but the core team remained, gathered in our main conference room. Through the glass walls, I could see Erica standing at the head of the table, gesturing toward projection screens filled with data visualizations and legal documents. Beside her sat Timmy, our lead developer, his wild curls even more chaotic than usual. A sure sign he'd been running his hands through his hair, his telltale stress response. 3 representatives from Vertex Technologies occupied the other side, of the table, their expressions serious as they reviewed last-minute details of tomorrow's announcement. And at the far end sat our legal team from Frost & Mitchell, one of Boston's premier corporate law firms. This was the reality of LifeSync, not a cute app created by a housewife with her husband's patient guidance, but a sophisticated technology company on the verge of a $60 million acquisition. "There she is," Erica announced as I entered. "Our fearless founder, fresh from playing the role of supportive spouse." I set my purse down, the weight of the evening's pretense still clinging to me. "Sorry I'm late. The dinner ran longer than expected?" "How was it?" Timmy asked, looking up from his laptop. "Another thrilling evening of being mansplained to about your own technology?" "Actually, it was more complicated than usual," I replied, taking a seat at the table. "Marcus Donnelly from Meridian was there." Erica's eyebrows shot up. "Marcus LifeSync changed my executive team S-Life Donnelly? That Marcus?" "The very one," I confirmed. "And he recognized me, or at least he strongly suspects that Tanner's housewife with a cute app is the same person as E.L. Monroe, founder of the company that's revolutionizing his workflow systems." "Well, that complicates things," Erica said with characteristic understatement. "Especially since Meridian is one of NextGen's target clients." Rebecca Chen, Vertex's lead negotiator, leaned forward. "Does this present a problem for tomorrow's announcement?" I considered the question carefully. "No, but it accelerates my timeline for revealing my identity to my husband. I'd planned to tell him privately after the announcement, but now—" I trailed off, recalculating scenarios in my head. "Now he might hear it from someone else first," Erica finished for me. The reality of my situation suddenly felt absurd. Sitting in a high-level corporate meeting discussing a multi-million-dollar acquisition while my husband believed I was picking up dry cleaning and planning dinner parties. "Let's focus on finalizing the announcement," I decided. "I'll handle the personal fallout." For the next hour, we reviewed the details of the acquisition. LifeSync would maintain its operational independence as a division of Vertex, with me continuing as CEO and our core team remaining intact. The technology would be integrated into Vertex's enterprise solutions, while our consumer app would continue to operate under the LifeSync brand. "The valuation breakdown," Rebecca explained, sliding a document across the table. $40 million in cash, $20 million in Vertex stock options, with $10 million of that allocated to employee retention packages. I scanned the pages, marveling at how clinical it all seemed on paper. 6 years of work, thousands of hours of coding, sleepless nights, and delicate deceptions reduced to financial terms and legal language. "And the press announcement?" I asked. "Scheduled for 9 a.m., Erica replied. "Vertex's PR team is coordinating with major tech publications. TechCrunch, Wired, and the Wall Street Journal have all confirmed coverage. The story angle they're most interested in is you, the female founder who built a tech company while maintaining a low profile." I smiled wryly. If they only knew how low. When the Vertex team and lawyers finally departed around 1 a.m., I remained in the office with Erica and Timmy, the three of us who had been with LifeSync from the beginning. "Are you ready for this?" Erica asked, pouring 3 glasses of the champagne we'd been saving. "Once that press release goes out, there's no going back. Tanner, his family, everyone will know." I accepted the glass, considering her question. Ready doesn't really factor into it anymore. It's happening, ready or not. "For what it's worth," Timmy said, raising his glass, "what you've built here is extraordinary. Not just the technology, but doing it while navigating everything else. The everything else being my marriage and the complex web of deceptions it had required." I raised my glass to meet theirs. To LifeSync, and to authenticity. Finally. After they left, I wandered through the quiet office, taking in the space that represented my true self, the self Tanner had never fully seen or acknowledged. 3 floors, 65 employees, and technology that major corporations were willing to pay millions to access. In my private office, I unlocked a drawer and removed a leather portfolio containing the original sketches for LifeSync's architecture, drawings, I'd made late at night while Tanner slept beside me, oblivious to the scope of what I was creating. The initial concept had been simple, an adaptive organizational system that learned from user behavior. But it had evolved into something far more sophisticated, an AI-driven platform that didn't just track tasks, but anticipated needs, optimized workflows, and eliminated inefficiencies across both personal and enterprise environments. While Tanner had been explaining basic programming concepts to me at our dinner table, I had been developing algorithms that were now considered cutting-edge in productivity technology. While he'd been praising my cute interface, I'd been securing patents for innovations that were reshaping how major corporations managed information flow. My phone buzzed with a text from Tanner. "Where are you?" "It's almost 2 a.m., I typed back. The familiar lie. Helping Claire with her charity event planning. Lost track of time. Heading home now. One more night of deception. In less than 8 hours, the press release would go live, and E.L. Monroe would be revealed as Eloise Harrison, wife of NextGen's lead developer. The woman who had been dismissed as just a housewife would be recognized as the founder and CEO of a $60 million tech company. I gathered my things, taking one last look around the office that represented my true accomplishments. On my desk sat a framed quote that Erica had given me on our first anniversary of incorporation. They did not know it was impossible, so they did it. Mark Twain. Beside it was a small photo of Tanner and me on our honeymoon, back when our partnership had felt equal and full of promise. I touched the frame lightly, wondering when and how we had drifted into our current dynamic. Him as the technological authority, me as the supportive spouse with a cute hobby. Tomorrow would change everything. The question was whether our marriage could survive the revelation not just of my success, but of the years of deception it had required. The deception that his behavior, his dismissiveness, his assumptions had made necessary. As I drove home through the quiet streets of Boston, I rehearsed the conversation I would have with Tanner after the announcement. The explanations, the justifications, the inevitable questions about why I had kept such a significant part of my life hidden from him. I had answers prepared, logical and emotional rationales carefully constructed. But the truth was simpler and more painful than any prepared statement. I had built LifeSync in secret because I had known, with absolute certainty, that Tanner would never have allowed me to build it as myself. I slipped into bed at 2:30 a.m., careful not to wake Tanner. But he stirred anyway, rolling over to face me with sleep-heavy eyes. "Late night with Claire?" he mumbled, reaching out to touch my arm. "Mm-hmm," I responded non-committally, guilt flickering through me at the ease with which the deception came after all these years. "You should have called," he said, his tone shifting from groggy to slightly accusatory. "I was worried," I texted. I reminded him gently. "Not until I texted you first." He propped himself up on one elbow, more awake now. "What charity event takes until 2 a.m. to plan?" A fair question, and one I'd have a prepared answer for if this were any other night. But with less than 7 hours until the announcement that would change everything, I found myself suddenly exhausted by the weight of sustained pretense. "It's complicated," I said, buying time. Tanner's eyes narrowed slightly. "Claire mentioned something strange at dinner with my parents last week. She said she hadn't seen you in over a month. But you've been going to charity planning meetings with her at least weekly." My heart rate accelerated. Claire. Of course. The one family member perceptive enough to notice the inconsistencies in my carefully constructed narrative. She must have forgotten, I offered weakly. "We've both been busy." "That's what I thought," Tanner said, his voice taking on the patronizing tone I'd grown to recognize as his explaining things to Eloise voice. "You women lead such complicated social lives. It's hard to keep track. But then tonight, at dinner, Marcus Donnelly said something odd, too. I stilled, keeping my expression neutral with practiced effort. Oh? He asked if you were involved with LifeSync's development. Said you seemed very knowledgeable about its architecture. Tanner gave a short laugh. I explained that you've picked up terminology from overhearing my work calls, but don't really understand the technical concepts behind them. I bit back the surge of frustration his words triggered. Even now, faced with direct evidence of my knowledge, his default was to explain it away as superficial mimicry rather than genuine understanding. How did Marcus respond? I asked carefully. He dropped it, Tanner said, though something in his tone suggested he wasn't entirely satisfied with that outcome. But it got me thinking about your app. You've been working on it for what, a year? Now? Longer, I said, the first truly honest thing I'd said since arriving home. Right. And I realized I haven't actually looked at it in months. Why don't you show me your progress tomorrow? I could give you some pointers on optimizing the code structure. The irony was almost painful. Hours before my company would be publicly valued at $60 million, my husband was offering to help optimize my code. Sure, I agreed, knowing it wouldn't happen. By the time tomorrow arrived, everything would be different. But let's get some sleep now. You have that big meeting with Patterson in the morning. Tanner groaned, flopping back onto his pillow. Don't remind me. Their CIO has been impossible to read lately. One minute he seems ready to sign, the next he's bringing up objections about implementation challenges. Because Marcus Donnelly had already decided against NextGen's solution in favor of LifeSync's enterprise platform, a fact I couldn't share without revealing everything prematurely. I'm sure you'll convince them, I said, the platitude falling easily from my lips. One more lie in a long series, though perhaps one of the last. With you as my good luck charm, how could I fail? Tanner said, pulling me closer and kissing my forehead. The gesture was affectionate, familiar, and suddenly suffocating in its presumption. I lay awake long after Tanner's breathing had evened into sleep, contemplating the rapidly approaching collision of my two separate lives. For years I'd maintained the division with painstaking care: Eloise Harrison, supportive wife, and E.L. Monroe, innovative CEO. Tomorrow, those identities would merge publicly, irrevocably. I must have fallen asleep eventually, because the next thing I knew, my alarm was buzzing at 6 a.m. I silenced it quickly, but Tanner was already stirring. Why so early? He mumbled into his pillow. The Patterson meeting isn't until 10. Promised to help Claire with some last-minute details. I lied smoothly, one final time. Go back to sleep. I'll see you later. He reached for me, his hand finding my wrist. You're being weird. Is everything okay? For a moment, I considered telling him then, having the conversation privately, before the public announcement. But the dining room of our home, with his dismissive comments still echoing from last night, wasn't where I wanted this revelation to happen. Everything's fine, I assured him, gently extracting my wrist from his grip. Just a busy day ahead. By 6:30 a.m., I was dressed and heading out the door when Tanner appeared in the kitchen, surprisingly alert for someone who'd been half asleep 20 minutes earlier. He was scrolling through his phone with one hand while pouring coffee with the other. Patterson just moved our meeting up to 8:30, he said without looking up. Something about a scheduling conflict. I froze. The timing couldn't be worse. 8:30 meant he'd still be in that meeting when the acquisition announcement went public at 9 a.m. Will you be done by 9? I asked, trying to keep my tone casual. Probably not. These meetings usually run at least an hour, and with all the technical questions Marcus has been raising lately, it could go longer. He looked up from his phone. Why? Did you need something at 9? No, I said quickly. Just wondering about your schedule. Tanner's gaze sharpened. What's going on with you, Eloise? You've been acting strange since last night. Nothing's going on, I insisted, gathering my bag and keys with careful nonchalance. I'm just tired from a late night. With Claire, he said flatly. Except I just got a text from Jordan about a breakfast meeting Claire's having with clients this morning, the one she's been preparing for all week. So unless she's in two places at once, you weren't with her last night. The floor seemed to shift beneath me. Caught in a direct lie, with no plausible alternative explanation at hand. Tanner, I can explain. Are you having an affair? He asked bluntly. The question was so unexpected, so completely disconnected from reality that I actually laughed. A short, startled sound that clearly wasn't the reaction he was expecting. An affair? No, absolutely not. Then where were you until 2:30 in the morning? And don't say with Claire because we both know that's not true. I took a deep breath, calculating my options. The announcement was less than 3 hours away. Any partial explanation would only create more questions, more confusion. I was at work, I said finally, opting for a fragment of truth. Work, he repeated skeptically. Your freelance web development that has suddenly started requiring middle-of-the-night hours? It's more complicated than that, I said, echoing my words from earlier. And I promise I'll explain everything later today. But right now, I really need to go. Tanner stepped forward, blocking my path to the door. No, you'll explain now. For months you've been disappearing for hours, being vague about your whereabouts, coming home late. If it's not an affair, then what is it? The irony that his description could equally apply to someone having an affair or running a successful tech company might have been amusing in different circumstances. Tanner, please, I have a meeting I can't miss. We'll talk later, I promise. A meeting, he repeated, his voice hardening. At 7 a.m., for your website work. I'd never seen this side of him before, suspicious, almost hostile, as controlling as he could be, as dismissive of my capabilities. He'd never questioned my fidelity or honesty so directly. Not exactly, I admitted, glancing at my watch. Every minute this conversation continued increased the risk that I'd miss the pre-announcement. Meeting with Vertex's executive team. Then what exactly? He pressed, still blocking my exit. I made a split-second decision. If you want to know what I've really been working on, turn on TechCrunch at 9 a.m. But right now, I need to go. TechCrunch? His confusion was evident. The tech news site? What does that have to do with 9 a.m.? I repeated firmly, shouldering past him. And Tanner? You might want to reschedule that Patterson meeting. Trust me on this. I left him standing in our kitchen, bewilderment and suspicion warring on his face. It wasn't how I'd planned for this to unfold, but perhaps it was fitting. After years of carefully maintaining separate lives, the collision was happening in fragments, messy and unscripted. As I got into my car, my phone lit up with a text from Erica. Vertex CEO arrived early. Press embargo lifts in exactly 2 hours. Where are you? I started the engine, pushing thoughts of Tanner's confusion aside. In 2 hours, explanations wouldn't be necessary. The truth would speak for itself. The LifeSync offices were already buzzing, with activity when I arrived at 7:15 a.m. PR representatives from Vertex mingled with our team, coordinating last-minute details for the press conference. Journalists would be arriving within the hour, and the entire tech industry was about to learn that the innovative workflow solution they'd been implementing was created by a woman whose husband still explained basic coding concepts to her over dinner. I slipped into my private office, closing the door on the controlled chaos outside. My hands were shaking slightly, not from the professional pressure of the acquisition announcement, but from the personal confrontation with Tanner. In all our years together, I'd never seen that particular look in his eyes. Suspicion verging on betrayal. You look like you could use this, Erica said, entering without knocking and placing a large coffee on my desk. She studied my face with the perceptiveness that made her both an excellent COO and a valued friend. What happened? Tanner? Knows something's up, I admitted, sinking into my chair. He caught me in a lie about where I was last night. He actually accused me of having an affair. Erica raised an eyebrow. Well, in a way, you have been having an affair. With your true self, your actual capabilities, the self he never acknowledged. Her observation struck uncomfortably close to the truth. I had been living a double life, sneaking away to express parts of myself that couldn't exist within the confines of my marriage as it was currently structured. I told him to watch TechCrunch at 9 a.m. if he wants to know what I've really been doing, I said, taking a long sip of the much-needed coffee. Bold move, Erica commented. How do you think he'll react when he finds out his just a housewife is about to become one of Boston's most talked-about tech entrepreneurs? I had asked myself that question countless times over the past months as the acquisition discussions progressed. Would Tanner be proud? Angry? Hurt? Would he see my success as a betrayal? Would he recognize his own role in creating the conditions that made my secrecy seem necessary? I honestly don't know, I admitted. Part of me hopes he'll be proud, that he'll recognize what I've built and support it. But another part knows he won't, Erica finished for me. Because if he were capable of that kind of support, you wouldn't have needed to hide LifeSync from him in the first place. Her assessment was brutally accurate. I had kept LifeSync secret not just to prove something to myself, but because I had known, with bone-deep certainty, how Tanner would have responded if I'd tried to build it openly. He would have helped by taking over, explaining, directing, molding it to his vision rather than mine. The app that had grown into a $60 million company would have become another extension of Tanner's expertise rather than an expression of my own. Do you regret it? Erica asked quietly. Any of it? The secrecy? The double life? The years of downplaying your own abilities? I considered her question seriously, examining the complicated tangle of emotions I'd been carrying. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that I couldn't share my genuine accomplishments with my husband. But do I regret building LifeSync the way I did? No. It needed to be mine. Completely mine. At least until it was established enough that no one could take it from me or diminish it. A knock at the door interrupted our conversation. Timmy poked his head in, his expression a mix of excitement and anxiety. Vertex's legal team wants to review the final press release with you, he said. And the Wall Street Journal reporter just arrived early. She's asking specifically about the mysterious female founder angle. Tell them I'll be right there, I replied, straightening my posture and slipping back into CEO mode. Timmy nodded and disappeared. So this is it, Erica said, watching me gather my composure. The moment E.L. Monroe and Eloise Harrison become the same person in the public eye. And in Tanner's eyes, I added, feeling the weight of that particular revelation. Erica hesitated at the door. Have you considered that your marriage might not survive this? Not because of the secrecy, but because the balance of power is about to shift dramatically. Tanner has built his identity around being the tech expert, the provider, the one with the impressive career. Are you prepared for what happens if he can't accept you as his equal, or heaven forbid, his superior, in the SOW? Field he thinks of as his territory? Her question articulated the fear I'd been avoiding. Tanner's sense of self was intricately tied to his perceived intellectual and professional superiority. Our marriage had operated on the unspoken understanding that he was the accomplished one, the expert, the success. What would happen when that dynamic was suddenly and publicly inverted? I don't know if our marriage will survive this, I acknowledged. But I do know that I can't keep living a divided life. Whatever happens with Tanner, I need to be whole. Erica nodded, understanding. For what it's worth, I think you're doing the right thing, even if it costs you your marriage. After she left, I spent a moment alone, centering myself for what was to come. On my desk sat 2 phones, my personal one, which showed 3 missed calls from Tanner, and my work phone, with notifications about the imminent press conference. 2 devices for 2 lives, about to converge into one. I thought back to the moment when LifeSync began. That night in our apartment when I first started coding what I told myself was just a project to keep my skills sharp. I had no way of knowing then that it would grow into this, that my small act of self-preservation would blossom into a company valued at $60 million with technology being implemented across major corporations. But I also couldn't have predicted how thoroughly the experience would change me. The Eloise who had accepted Tanner's dismissive explanations, who had nodded politely while he mansplained concepts she already understood, who had made herself smaller to accommodate his need to feel superior, that woman was gone. In her place stood the CEO of LifeSync, a woman who had proven her capabilities beyond any doubt, who had earned the respect of some of the most accomplished people in the tech industry. Could that woman still be Tanner's wife? Could he accept and love the real me, not the diminished version I'd presented to maintain marital harmony? My personal phone buzzed with another call from Tanner. I let it go to voicemail, knowing that any conversation now would only be a preamble to the much larger discussion that would follow the announcement. Instead, I picked up my work phone and texted Erica, "Ready when you are." I stood and smoothed my dress, a sleek, professional sheath that projected confidence and competence, nothing like the casual clothes Tanner was accustomed to seeing me in. I'd selected it specifically for today, for the moment I would step fully into my public identity as E.L. Monroe, tech innovator and CEO. As I prepared to leave my office and face the waiting press, I caught a glimpse of myself in the window's reflection, shoulders back, chin up, eyes clear and focused. This was who I had always been beneath the accommodating facade. This was the self I had protected and nurtured in secret, the self that could finally emerge into the light. Whatever happened with Tanner, whatever the cost to my marriage or my comfortable life, I couldn't regret this moment of integration. After years of living as less than whole, I was finally allowing myself to be fully seen. I took a deep breath and opened the door, stepping out to claim my true identity publicly for the first time. 5 minutes until we go live, the Vertex PR director announced, surveying the assembled media representatives with practiced calm. The conference room had been transformed into a makeshift press area, with the LifeSync and Vertex logos displayed prominently behind the podium. Camera crews from local stations and tech industry outlets adjusted their equipment, while reporters tapped notes into tablets. I stood in the adjacent room, watching through the glass partition as Rebecca Chen, Vertex's CEO, chatted amiably with journalists. My phone buzzed again. Tanner's 7th call in the past half hour. This time I answered. "Eloise, what the hell is going on?" His voice was tight with tension. "I'm sitting in the conference room at Patterson, and Marcus Donnelly just told me he needs to delay our meeting because he's waiting for a major industry announcement at 9. He had this strange look when he mentioned it, like he knows something. I don't. And then he asked about you." I glanced at the clock. 8:55 a.m. 5 minutes until the press embargo lifted, until my dual identity became public knowledge. "Tanner, And now Jordan's texting me about some big news in the tech sector. He says I should be watching the live streams. What does this have to do with you telling me to check TechCrunch? Eloise, I need you to explain what's happening. Right now." The demand in his tone, the entitlement to an immediate explanation on his schedule, regardless of what I might be doing, crystallized everything that had led to this moment. Years of being interrupted, dismissed, explained to, and underestimated condensed into this single interaction where he once again assumed his priorities automatically superseded mine. "I'm about to go into an important meeting," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "Watch the announcement at 9, and we'll talk afterward." "Important meeting?" Disbelief colored his words. "More important than explaining to your husband why you've been lying about your whereabouts? More important than my Patterson presentation, which is apparently being delayed because of whatever this announcement is?" Yes, I said simply. More important than both of those things. His sharp intake of breath was audible through the phone. In 11 years of marriage, I had never so directly challenged his assumption that his work, his concerns, his schedule took precedence. I don't recognize you right now, he said finally. It's like you've become a different person overnight. Not overnight, I corrected him gently. Over years. You just haven't been paying attention. Before he could respond, Erica appeared at my elbow. They're ready for you, she murmured. I have to go, I told Tanner. Watch the live stream. Eloise, don't you dare hang up. I ended the call and switched my phone to silent, handing it to Erica. No more interruptions. She took it, with a knowing nod. He's not taking it well? He doesn't even know what it is yet, I replied, smoothing my hair and checking my appearance one last time in the reflection of the glass. But no, he's not handling the disruption to his worldview gracefully. As we prepared to enter the conference room, my work phone chimed with an incoming text. It was from Claire. Just got a frantic call from Tanner asking if I know what's going on with you. Whatever it is, I'm on your side. Call me when you can. The unexpected show of support brought a lump to my throat. Perhaps I had more allies in the Harrison family than I'd realized. At exactly 9 o'clock, Rebecca Chen approached the podium, and the murmur of conversation in the room quieted. Good morning, and thank you for joining us on short notice, she began with the polished ease of someone accustomed to public speaking. Vertex Technologies is pleased to announce the acquisition of LifeSync, the innovative workflow optimization platform that has revolutionized productivity management for both individual and enterprise users. As Rebecca detailed the financial aspects of the acquisition, I felt a curious sense of calm descend. After years of division and careful compartmentalization, my life was about to become integrated, messily, publicly, irrevocably. The technology behind LifeSync represents a quantum leap in how we understand and optimize human productivity, Rebecca continued. Its adaptive AI doesn't just track tasks, but actively learns from user behavior to create increasingly efficient workflows. This acquisition values LifeSync at $60 million, reflecting both the current impact of the technology and its future potential. A ripple of interest moved through the assembled journalists. $60 million was significant enough to make this more than just another tech acquisition story. But perhaps the most interesting aspect of this announcement, Rebecca said, a slight smile playing at her lips, is the founder and CEO of LifeSync, who has until now maintained a deliberately low profile in the industry. It is my pleasure to introduce E.L. Monroe, the visionary behind LifeSync's groundbreaking technology. This was it, the moment of revelation. I stepped forward to join Rebecca at the podium as cameras flashed and journalists leaned forward with renewed interest. Thank you, Rebecca, I began, my voice clear and confident despite the knowledge that somewhere across town, Tanner was watching this unfold in real time, his reality shifting with each word I spoke. For those who don't know me, my full name is Eloise Larson Monroe Harrison. I'm the founder and CEO of LifeSync, and I've spent the past 6 years developing technology that fundamentally reimagines how we organize information and optimize workflows. I could almost feel the journalists making the connection, Harrison, as in the wife of Tanner Harrison from Next Gen Solutions. Several began typing rapidly on their devices. LifeSync began as a response to a problem I identified in existing organizational systems, I continued, sticking to the agreed-upon narrative. Traditional productivity tools track what users do but don't learn or adapt based on those behaviors. Our core innovation was creating an AI system that recognizes patterns in how individuals and teams process information, then continuously optimizes their workflows based on those insights. As I outlined the technology and growth trajectory that had led to this acquisition, I was acutely aware that I was publicly claiming expertise in the very field where Tanner had consistently dismissed my capabilities. Every technical term I used with confidence, every complex concept I explained with clarity, was a direct contradiction to the narrative he had constructed about me, and that I had allowed to persist. The first question from a TechCrunch reporter was exactly what we had anticipated. Ms. Harrison, you've maintained a remarkably low profile despite LifeSync's growing industry presence. Was this a deliberate strategy? And if so, why? Here it was, the moment where my personal and professional lives would fully collide. I had prepared a diplomatic answer about focusing on product development rather than personal brand building. But standing at the podium, aware that Tanner was watching, that answer suddenly felt like one more accommodation, one more careful evasion of the truth. Yes, it was deliberate, I acknowledged. And the reasons were both professional and personal. Professionally, I wanted LifeSync to be evaluated on its technological merits rather than becoming a personality-driven company. Personally, I paused, making a split-second decision to be more candid than planned. Personally, I found that being underestimated created a unique kind of freedom to build something authentic without external interference or expectations. The Wall Street Journal reporter leaned forward. Are you referring to gender bias in the tech industry? That's certainly part of it, I agreed. But it was also more specific than that. Sometimes the people closest to you can be the ones who most limit your vision of what's possible. My phone, still in Erica's possession at the side of the room, was lighting up continuously now. Calls from Tanner, from Jordan, from Will Harrison. News traveled fast, and the Harrison family was discovering that Just a Housewife had been building a multi-million-dollar company right under their noses. As questions continued about LifeSync's technology and future plans under Vertex, I maintained my professional composure. But beneath the calm exterior, I was bracing for the personal tsunami that would follow this public revelation. There was no going back to being the Eloise who nodded and smiled while Tanner explained basic coding concepts. That version of me had been permanently erased, replaced by the woman standing confidently at the podium discussing neural networks and adaptive algorithms. When the press conference concluded 30 minutes later, Erica approached with my personal phone. 27 missed calls, she reported. 15 from Tanner, 8 from Jordan, 3 from your father-in-law, and 1 from Claire. I took the phone, seeing the flood of text notifications as well. The first from Tanner had been sent at exactly 9:03 a.m. What the actual hell? This was followed by a series of increasingly agitated messages. Is this some kind of joke? $60 million? How could you keep this from me? I'm your husband. Everyone at Patterson is staring at me. Call me immediately. The most recent message sent just 2 minutes ago was different in tone. I'm coming to your office. We need to talk, now. I showed it to Erica, who raised her eyebrows. Well, that was faster than expected. Are you ready for this confrontation? Was I ready? After years of suppressing my true capabilities, of carefully maintaining a division between my authentic self and the version of me that existed in my marriage, was I prepared for the messy, painful process of integration that would follow? No, I admitted. But it's happening regardless. As if on cue, the receptionist's voice came through on the intercom. Ms. Harrison, your husband is in the lobby. He's quite insistent about seeing you immediately. The breaking point had arrived. The carefully constructed walls between my two lives had crumbled completely, and now I would face the consequences, and perhaps the rewards, of finally being fully seen. Would you like me to have security escort him to a private conference room? The receptionist asked, her voice carefully, neutral though her expression conveyed understanding. Everyone at LifeSync knew about my carefully separated worlds, and they had all anticipated this moment nearly as much as I had. Yes, I decided. The small one on the 3rd floor. Tell him I'll be there in 10 minutes. 10 minutes? Erica questioned after I ended the call. He's clearly fuming. Is making him wait the best strategy? I gathered the press materials from the podium, buying myself a moment to formulate my thoughts. This is the first time in our marriage that I'm not dropping everything to accommodate Tanner's schedule or emotional state. 10 minutes isn't spite. It's establishing that I have responsibilities here that matter. Erica nodded, understanding the significance. What's your plan? To be honest, I said simply. No more careful editing, no more strategic omissions, no more making myself smaller to protect his ego. Whatever happens to our marriage as a result of that honesty, happens. The Vertex executives were still mingling with journalists in the main conference room, fielding technical questions and discussing integration timelines. Rebecca Chen caught my eye through the crowd and made her way over. Congratulations, she said warmly. You were excellent. The underestimated angle is already picking up traction online. TechCrunch just posted with the headline, The $60 Million Housewife, How Being Underestimated Became Eloise Harrison's Secret Weapon. Under different circumstances, I might have cringed at the housewife framing, but today it felt appropriate. Bridge between the identity I'd presented and the one I'd built. There's one complication, I admitted. My husband just arrived. He wasn't prepared for this announcement. Rebecca's eyebrows rose slightly. He didn't know about the acquisition? He didn't know about LifeSync, I clarified. At least, not its true scope or my role in it. Rebecca absorbed this with the quick adaptability that had made her a successful CEO. I see. Do you need privacy for that conversation? We can move the journalists to Vertex's offices for the follow-up interviews. Thank you, but that's not necessary, I said. I have a conference room set aside. This is a personal matter, and I don't want it to overshadow today's announcement. After Rebecca returned to the media scrum, Timmy approached with his laptop. Early press coverage is overwhelmingly positive, he reported, and the LifeSync app has seen a 300% increase in downloads in the past 30 minutes. People love the underdog narrative. The irony wasn't lost on me. My years of careful anonymity had ultimately created a more compelling public emergence than any planned strategy could have achieved. The contrast between housewife with a hobby and $60 million tech CEO was too dramatic for the media to resist. There's something else, Timmy added, his expression uncharacteristically serious. Marcus Donnelly from Meridian just called. He said to tell you that the Patterson Group meeting with NextGen has been indefinitely postponed following this morning's announcement. The professional implications for Tanner were beginning to materialize. His company had been counting on the Patterson contract, a contract that would now almost certainly go to a LifeSync integration through Vertex. My success had directly undermined his, not by design, but as an inevitable consequence of our overlapping professional spheres. I checked my watch. 7 minutes until I needed to face Tanner. 7 minutes to center myself for what would undoubtedly be the most difficult conversation of our marriage. I need a moment alone, I told Erica and Timmy. I'll meet Tanner at 9:45, in my private office. I closed the door and took a deep breath, finally allowing myself to feel the full magnitude of what had just occurred. After 6 years of careful separation, of maintaining a divided self, I had publicly integrated my personal and professional identities. E.L. Monroe and Eloise Harrison were now one person in the eyes of the world. The relief was almost overwhelming. No more elaborate scheduling deceptions. No more pretending to be less knowledgeable than I was. No more nodding along as Tanner explained concepts I had mastered years ago. But with that relief came grief for what would likely be lost. Could our marriage survive such a fundamental shift in its power dynamic? Could Tanner accept me as I truly was? Not just his supportive wife, but a successful tech innovator in her own right? I moved to the window looking out at the Boston skyline, the city where I'd been born, where I'd studied at MIT, where I'd fallen in love with Tanner, and where I'd secretly built something remarkable. Whatever happened in the next hour would determine whether my future in this city included him or not. My reflection in the glass showed someone I recognized, but Tanner might not. A confident professional in a tailored dress, standing straight and undiminished. Not the accommodating wife in casual clothes who moved through their home, making his life smoother, easier, more comfortable. A soft knock at the door interrupted my thoughts. Erica entered without waiting for a response. One of the privileges of our long friendship. 5-minute warning, she said. And you should know. The LifeSync team is gathering in the main workspace. They want to see you before you meet with Tanner. Curious, I followed her to the open central area where all 65 LifeSync employees had assembled. As I appeared, they broke into applause, sustained genuine appreciation that brought unexpected tears to my eyes. We just wanted you to remember who's in your corner, Sophia from UX Design called out. No matter what happens next door, the support of my team, people who had known and respected the real me all along, gave me the final piece of emotional armor I needed for the confrontation ahead. Whatever happened with Tanner, I had built something valuable here, both in technology and human connections. Thank you, I said simply, the words inadequate for the gratitude I felt. As I made my way to the third-floor conference room, I passed familiar landmarks of the life I'd built while Tanner wasn't looking, the whiteboard where we'd mapped out LifeSync's first enterprise architecture, the break room where we'd celebrated our millionth user, the small office that had been our entire operation in the beginning. I paused outside the conference room door, gathering myself for what came next. Through the frosted glass, I could see Tanner's silhouette pacing back and forth, his body language radiating tension. The man who had confidently informed his family that I was just a housewife who plays with computers was about to confront the reality that I was now worth more, both financially and in the tech industry's estimation, than he was. My phone buzzed, with one final text before I entered. It was from Claire. Just saw the announcement. You're a badass. Whatever Tanner says, remember that. Her support brought a smile to my face, a final reminder that not everyone in my life had underestimated me. With that thought providing strength, I took a deep breath and opened the door, ready to face Tanner not as the diminished version of myself I'd presented at home, but as who I truly was. Eloise Harrison, founder and CEO of LifeSync, a woman who had finally stopped making herself smaller to accommodate someone else's limitations. As the door closed behind me, I felt a profound shift in my internal landscape. For years, I had carefully managed Tanner's feelings, anticipating his reactions and adjusting my behavior accordingly. Now, for perhaps the first time in our marriage, I was prioritizing my truth over his comfort. Whatever happened next would be based on authentic reality rather than a carefully maintained illusion. The private turning point had arrived. I was no longer divided. I was whole. Tanner froze mid-pace as I entered the conference room, his expression cycling rapidly through shock, anger, and confusion. For a moment, we simply stared at each other, husband and wife, suddenly strangers. $60 million, he finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. $60 million. I set my portfolio on the conference table, maintaining the calm professionalism that had carried me through the press conference. Yes, that's the acquisition value. Vertex placed on LifeSync. LifeSync, he repeated, as if testing the word for hidden meanings. Your cute little planning app. The one I offered to help you optimize. The one you let me believe was a hobby project. Yes, I acknowledged, neither defending nor apologizing. How long? He demanded, his voice rising slightly. How long have you been lying to me? I took a seat at the conference table, gesturing for him to do the same. After a moment's hesitation, he complied, though his body remained tense, poised for confrontation. I've been developing LifeSync for 6 years, I said evenly. Since 3 months after you started at Next Gen. 6 years, he echoed incredulously. 6 years of deception. 6 years of… what? Coming home and pretending to be my supportive wife while secretly building a tech company? I considered his framing. The implicit accusation that being a CEO and being a supportive wife were somehow mutually exclusive. I never pretended to be supportive, Tanner. I was supportive. I listened to your work stories, celebrated your successes, helped you prepare presentations. The deception wasn't about my support for you. It was about the full scope of my own capabilities and activities. He leaned forward, eyes narrowing. Don't split hairs, Eloise. You deliberately hid this from me. You created a whole separate life I knew nothing about. Yes, I agreed. I did. My straightforward acknowledgement seemed to throw him off balance. He had clearly come prepared for denials or elaborate justifications. Why? He asked, genuine bewilderment mixing with his anger. Why would you hide this? Did you think I wouldn't support you building an app? This was the crucial question, the one I had anticipated and prepared for. My answer would determine whether there was any path forward for our marriage. I hid it because I needed to build it myself, on my terms, without being guided or directed or helped, I explained carefully. And based on our established patterns, I knew that wouldn't be possible if you were aware of what I was doing. His face flushed. What's that supposed to mean? You think I would have taken over your project? Not intentionally, I clarified. But yes, that's exactly what would have happened. Think about it, Tanner. When have you ever seen me work on something technical without offering corrections? When have you ever heard me express an idea in the tech space without explaining why it would or wouldn't work? When have you ever treated my technical abilities as equal to yours? He opened his mouth to object, then closed it again, visibly, cycling through memories, searching for counterexamples. That's different, he finally said. I was trying to help you learn. But I didn't need that kind of help, I said gently. I graduated top of our class at MIT. I had multiple job offers from major tech companies before we got married. I wasn't a novice needing guidance. I was your equal, who gradually became less visible in her own expertise. Tanner's expression shifted as he processed this perspective, one he had clearly never considered before. So instead of talking to me about it, you created this elaborate deception? You built an entire company in secret while letting me believe you were… what? Just a housewife with a cute hobby? He winced slightly as he echoed the patronizing words he had used so casually at his parents' dinner. Those are your words, not mine, I pointed out. But yes, I let you believe what you wanted to believe about my capabilities because it gave me the space to build something authentic. Tanner stood abruptly, resuming his pacing. Do you have any idea how this makes me look? My wife secretly builds a company worth $60 million while I'm explaining basic coding concepts to her at dinner? The entire tech industry is going to be laughing at me. There it was, the crux of his distress. Not that I had built something remarkable, but how my success reflected on him. Not that I had kept secrets, but that those secrets now made him appear foolish in the eyes of others. This isn't about you, Tanner, I said quietly. It never was. Not about me? He whirled to face me. You're my wife. We're supposed to be partners. And now I find out you've been leading some kind of double life, building a company that's apparently significant enough to be acquired for $60 million, all while pretending to be… To be what? I prompted when he trailed off. Less capable than I am? Less ambitious? Less intelligent? Tell me, Tanner, what exactly was I pretending to be in our marriage? He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident in every movement. I don't know. The woman I married? The person I thought I knew? I am still that person, I insisted. I'm just more than you allowed yourself to see. A knock at the door interrupted what was clearly building toward a more heated exchange. Erica entered without waiting for a response, her expression professionally neutral though her eyes conveyed a warning. Sorry to interrupt, she said briskly. but there's a situation that needs your immediate attention. The Meridian integration team is on the line with questions about the Patterson implementation timeline. The strategic timing of this interruption wasn't lost on me. Erica was giving me an exit if I needed it, while simultaneously making a point about my professional responsibilities. "Can it wait 15 minutes?" I asked, maintaining the fiction that this was an actual emergency. "They're on a tight schedule," Erica replied smoothly. "But I can tell them you're in an important meeting if necessary." I glanced at Tanner, whose expression had shifted from anger to something closer to shock as he watched this interaction. Further, evidence of the professional reality he had never bothered to imagine. "No, I'll take it," I decided, standing. "Tanner, I need to handle this. We can continue our conversation in a few minutes." "Seriously?" he asked incredulously. "You're walking out in the middle of this discussion to take a business call? This is our marriage we're talking about." The irony of his objection nearly made me laugh. How many times had he left in the middle of dinner, a movie, even once during my birthday celebration, to handle a quick work emergency? How many times had I rearranged my schedule, my needs, my priorities to accommodate his professional demands? "Yes," I said simply. "This is an important business matter that requires my attention as CEO. I'll be back shortly and we can continue our discussion." As I followed Erica out of the room, I heard Tanner mutter, "I don't even know who you are anymore." In the hallway, Erica raised an eyebrow. "There is no Meridian call, obviously, but you looked like you could use a strategic pause. Is it as bad as expected?" I leaned against the wall, suddenly aware of the tension I'd been carrying throughout, the confrontation. He's not angry that I built something successful. He's angry that I did it without his knowledge or input, and he's humiliated that others will know he underestimated me. "So it's about his ego, not your achievement," Erica observed. "Not exactly surprising." "No," I agreed. "Not surprising, but still disappointing." I checked my phone to find 3 missed calls from Jordan and another text from Claire. "Tanner called Jordan from your office. The whole family knows. Will is apparently having some kind of meltdown about deception and family loyalty. I still think you're brilliant. Call me when you can." The ripple effects were spreading outward, as I had known they would. This wasn't just about my marriage to Tanner, but my place in the larger Harrison family hierarchy. A hierarchy that had always positioned me as peripheral, supportive, decorative rather than substantive. "I need a few minutes to collect my thoughts before I go back in there," I told Erica. "Have Sophia bring me the Patterson integration timeline. If I'm going to use work as an excuse, I might as well actually review the materials." In my office, I took a moment to breathe deeply, centering myself for the next round of confrontation. On my desk, a notification appeared on my computer screen, an email from Rebecca Chen with the subject line, "NYT wants to profile you as the stealth CEO. Interested?" The world was already creating a narrative around my story, finding meaning in the contrast between my public persona as Tanner's wife and my private success as a tech innovator. Meanwhile, in a conference room 1 floor below, my husband was grappling with the collapse of his own narrative about who I was and what I was capable of. I picked up the Patterson integration timeline Sophia had delivered, scanning the document without really absorbing its contents. The professional details were a convenient shield, a few minutes' respite from the personal reckoning waiting downstairs. But they were also a reminder of what I had built, what I had earned through my own intelligence and determination, achievements that didn't diminish Tanner, but existed independently of him. After 15 minutes, I gathered my materials and prepared to return to the conference room. Whatever happened next, I would face it not as the accommodating wife who prioritized harmony over authenticity, but as the integrated woman I had become, someone who could be both supportive partner and successful CEO, if only Tanner could. Expand his vision of who I was allowed to be in his life. When I returned to the conference room, Tanner was sitting with his laptop open, intently scrolling through what appeared to be news coverage of the LifeSync acquisition. His expression had shifted from anger to something more complex, a mixture of confusion, wounded pride, and reluctant admiration. "Your app uses neural networks for predictive task optimization," he said without looking up as I entered. "The architecture is more sophisticated than anything NextGen has implemented for workflow management." It wasn't an apology or even an acknowledgement of my achievement, but it was a recognition of the technical reality, something I hadn't expected. "So soon?" "Yes," I confirmed, taking my seat across from him. That was the breakthrough that caught Vertex's attention. The system doesn't just track tasks, but anticipates needs based on established patterns and contextual factors. Tanner nodded slowly, his eyes still fixed on the screen. "The TechCrunch deep dive says you coded the initial prototype yourself. They're calling the core algorithm revolutionary." There was a note of disbelief in his voice, but also a hint of the professional respect he'd never before directed toward me. "The original framework?" "Yes," I said, neither minimizing nor exaggerating. "My contribution? Timmy refined it once he joined the team, but the conceptual architecture was mine." Finally, Tanner looked up, meeting my eyes with an expression I couldn't quite interpret. "Why didn't you ever talk to me about this? Not as your husband who might take over, but as a fellow developer who might have, I don't know, appreciated what you were building?" The question caught me off guard. Perhaps the first genuine inquiry he'd made about my perspective, rather than his own feelings about the situation. "Because those boundaries didn't exist in our relationship," I answered honestly. "You've never interacted with me as a fellow developer. From the moment we moved in together, you positioned yourself as the technical authority and me as the student or observer. There was no space where we could discuss technology as equals." Tanner seemed about to object, then visibly reconsidered, running through memories with new awareness. Was I really that dismissive? "Not intentionally cruel," I clarified, "but consistently undermining, yes. Every technical conversation became a lecture. Every idea I expressed got an evaluation rather than engagement. It was like speaking to a professor rather than a partner." He closed his laptop, his defensive posture softening slightly. "I didn't see it that way. I thought I was being helpful, sharing my expertise." "I know," I acknowledged. "That's why I never confronted you about it. You weren't trying to diminish me. It just never occurred to you that I might have expertise of my own." For a moment, something like genuine reflection crossed his features. Then his phone buzzed, breaking the tentative connection. He glanced at the screen and his expression hardened again. "My father's calling an emergency family meeting tonight. Apparently, your announcement has created serious concerns about family trust and business implications." He looked up with renewed irritation. "Do you have any idea what this has done to my professional standing? Patterson has canceled our contract negotiations completely." And just like that, the momentary window of mutual understanding closed. We were back to how my actions had affected him, his career, his family's perception. "That was never my intention," I said carefully. "LifeSync and NextGen operate in adjacent, but different spaces. There's no reason both companies can't succeed." "Except that Patterson clearly disagrees," Tanner countered. "They've already decided LifeSync's solution is superior to ours. And now everyone knows that my wife built the competing product while I was clueless. Do you have any idea how that makes me look?" I took a deep breath, recognizing that we were circling back to the same issue. "Tanner, this isn't about you. My success doesn't diminish yours." "Easy for you to say from the winner's circle," he retorted. "Your company just sold for $60 million while mine is losing its biggest potential client." This was the fundamental disconnect, his persistent framing of my achievement as something that happened to him rather than something I had earned through my own merit. "I understand you're feeling blindsided," I offered, trying a different approach. And I regret that this has complicated your professional situation. But can you try, just for a moment, to see this from my perspective? I built something valuable, something that helps people work more efficiently, something the market has validated as worthwhile. Can you acknowledge that achievement without making it about you? Tanner was silent for a long moment, visibly struggling with competing impulses. Finally, he sighed, a fraction of his defensive posture easing. It is impressive, he admitted reluctantly. The technical architecture, the market penetration, keeping it secret all this time. I didn't think you were capable of this level of work. It was a backhanded compliment at best, the surprise revealing just how thoroughly he had underestimated me, but it was the first acknowledgement of my accomplishment on its own terms. Thank you, I said simply. So what now? He asked. You're suddenly a millionaire tech CEO with a public profile. Where does that leave us? Our marriage? It was the question I'd been anticipating and dreading. The brief moment of professional recognition hadn't addressed the deeper issues in our relationship, the fundamental imbalance that had led me to build LifeSync in secret in the first place. That depends, I said carefully, on whether you can accept me as I actually am, not just as your supportive wife, but as someone with her own ambitions, her own expertise, her own independent success. Tanner nodded slowly, as if considering this reframing of our relationship. For a moment, I allowed myself to hope that perhaps we could find a new equilibrium, one built on mutual respect rather than hierarchical positioning. I think I can try, he said finally. If you can understand how difficult this adjustment is for me. It wasn't a resounding affirmation, but it was an opening, a tentative willingness to envision a different kind of partnership. But as I studied his expression, I realized that his primary concern remained how to integrate my success into his worldview, rather than recognizing it as independent from him entirely. This wasn't a resolution. It was a temporary truce that left the fundamental dynamics of our relationship unaddressed. The real work of redefining our marriage as a partnership of equals still lay ahead, and I wasn't convinced that Tanner truly understood what that would require of him. After Tanner left to process everything, as he put it, I remained in the conference room, staring at the space he'd occupied. Our conversation had yielded a tentative truce rather than a genuine resolution, and I harbored no illusions about the challenges ahead. His family meeting tonight would undoubtedly position me as the villain, the deceptive wife who had embarrassed the Harrison name through her secret business dealings. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire. Family meeting at the fortress tonight at 7. Will is on the warpath. Jordan's trying to calm him down. I'm supposed to be mad at you too, but I'm secretly impressed. Can we talk before then? The fortress was Claire's sardonic nickname for Will and Grace's Wellesley home, where family judgments were handed down like royal decrees. I had been summoned for trial, it seemed. I texted back, "Meet me at Reverie Cafe at 5?" Claire's response was immediate. Perfect. Bringing reinforcements. Curious about these reinforcements, I headed back to my office, where Erica was waiting with Rebecca Chen from Vertex. How did it go? Erica asked, studying my expression. About as expected, I replied. He acknowledged the technical achievement but remains focused on how it affects him. We reached a temporary understanding, but the real test will be tonight's. Family inquisition. Rebecca raised an eyebrow. Family inquisition? My father-in-law has called an emergency family meeting, I explained. Apparently, my success has created serious concerns about family trust and business implications. Rebecca nodded thoughtfully. Not surprising. The stock market is already responding. NextGen's shares dropped 8% after our announcement once. Analysts connected the dots about Patterson likely moving to LifeSync's platform. This wasn't what I had wanted or intended. Despite the years of dismissal and underestimation, I had never sought to actively harm Tanner's company. The market dynamics were simply playing out their natural course, the better technology winning the client. I need to prepare for tonight, I said. Not just emotionally, but strategically. Agreed, Erica responded, pulling out her tablet. And we've already started. First, the facts. LifeSync's technology is objectively superior to next-gens for workflow management. That's not opinion. It's demonstrated by implementation metrics. Across multiple enterprise clients, she swiped through several screens, displaying performance comparisons. Second, the acquisition by Vertex creates significant opportunities for next-gen if they're smart enough to see it. As your husband's company, they could position themselves for preferential partnership arrangements. Rebecca nodded. Vertex would be open to that conversation. We have no interest in creating family conflict. I considered this angle. So rather than competitors, we could position ourselves as complementary solutions? Next-gen's healthcare management systems working in concert? With LifeSync's workflow optimization? Exactly, Erica confirmed. It's a face-saving opportunity for Tanner and potential value creation for both companies. The Harrison family should be celebrating this synergy, not treating it as a betrayal. It was a logical, business-oriented approach, presenting my success as a family asset rather than a personal accomplishment that threatened Tanner's standing. Whether the Harrisons would see it that way was another matter entirely. There's something else to consider, Rebecca added carefully. The narrative around your story is gaining significant traction. The underestimated wife who built a tech empire while her husband explained coding to her is resonating strongly, particularly with women in tech. How you handle the family dynamics will inevitably become part of that narrative. This added another layer of complexity. My private marriage. Negotiations were now playing out against the backdrop of public interest in my story. How Tanner and his family responded wouldn't just affect our personal relationships, but would be scrutinized as a representation of broader gender dynamics in the industry. I'm meeting Claire, my sister-in-law, before the family gathering, I said. She's been surprisingly supportive, and she mentioned bringing reinforcements. I'm not sure what that means, but I could use allies within the family system. Erica checked her watch. You have a few hours before that meeting. In the meantime, I suggest we draft potential partnership frameworks between NextGen and LifeSync Vertex. Having concrete business proposals might help shift the conversation from emotional betrayal to strategic opportunity. For the next 2 hours, we developed specific integration scenarios between the company's technologies, identifying areas where collaboration could create value beyond what either platform could achieve independently. It was good, solid work, the kind of strategic planning I excelled at, but had never been invited to contribute to family business discussions. At 4:30, I changed into fresh clothes I kept at the office, still professional, but slightly less formal than my press conference attire. As I gathered my materials for the cafe meeting with Claire, my phone rang. It was Jordan, Tanner's brother. Eloise, he began without preamble. I've just spent an hour talking my father down from legal action. He seems to think you've violated some kind of family business ethics by not disclosing your company's work in a competing space. I hadn't expected direct contact from Jordan, who typically maintained careful neutrality in family conflicts. Legal action would be completely unfounded, I replied. LifeSync and NextGen weren't direct competitors until recently, and I've maintained appropriate corporate separation throughout. I know that, Jordan said, surprising me further. That's essentially what I told him. But this isn't really about legal issues. It's about his perception that you've humiliated Tanner and, by extension, the Harrison name. By succeeding at something Tanner dismissed as trivial? I couldn't keep the edge from my voice. Jordan was quiet for a moment. For what it's worth, I've reviewed LifeSync's technology. It's impressive work, Eloise. Genuinely innovative. I wish you'd felt comfortable sharing that side of yourself with the family. His unexpected acknowledgement momentarily took my breath away. Thank you, Jordan. That means a lot. Don't thank me yet, he cautioned. Tonight won't be easy. My father is gathering allies, and he expects everyone to close ranks around Tanner. Just be prepared. After we disconnected, I sat for a moment absorbing this new information. Lines were being drawn for tonight's confrontation, but perhaps I had more potential allies within the Harrison family than I'd realized. Between Claire's mysterious reinforcements and Jordan's surprising acknowledgement of my work, there were cracks in what I had assumed would be a unified front against me. With renewed determination, I gathered my materials and headed to meet Claire. Whatever the Harrison family had planned for tonight, I would be ready, not just with emotional resilience, but with concrete business proposals and, it seemed, a few family allies of my own. Reverie Cafe sat midway between the financial district and Wellesley, neutral territory for my meeting with Claire. I arrived early, selecting a quiet corner table that offered privacy while allowing me to watch. The entrance. The familiar surroundings provided a strange comfort, a momentary respite before tonight's confrontation. I ordered a chai latte and reviewed my notes one final time. The partnership proposals between LifeSync Vertex and NextGen were solid, offering genuine value to both companies. Whether the Harrison family would be receptive to business logic in the midst of emotional turmoil remained to be seen. At precisely 5 p.m., Claire entered the cafe. She wasn't alone. Beside her walked a woman I recognized immediately, Grace Harrison's sister, Erica's namesake, and my aunt-in-law, Professor Erica Larson of MIT's Computer Science Department, and my former academic advisor. "Eloise," she greeted. Me warmly, eyes twinkling behind stylish glasses. Or should I say E.L. Monroe, the tech world's most intriguing mystery CEO? I stood to embrace them both, genuinely surprised by Aunt Erica's presence. "I didn't expect to see you here." "When Claire called to tell me about your dramatic unveiling, I knew I had to come," she explained as they took seats across from me. "Not to mention, Will is trying to rally the entire family against you. I thought you could use another voice of reason." Claire smiled. "Aunt Erica was the first person I thought of when I saw the announcement. I remembered she was your advisor at MIT. And I always wondered what happened to my most promising student," Aunt Erica added, studying me thoughtfully. "When you declined those job offers to focus on married life, I confess I was disappointed. Now I see you were playing a much longer game." The barista delivered their drinks, an Americano for Claire and espresso for Aunt Erica. Once he departed, Claire leaned forward. "The family meeting tonight is going to be brutal," she warned. "Will is furious, not just about the secrecy, but about the business implications. He's convinced you deliberately sabotaged Tanner's career." "That's absurd," I replied. "LifeSync was never intended to compete with NextGen. The technologies evolved in parallel, and the market made its choice based on merit." Aunt Erica nodded approvingly. "A point I intend to make quite forcefully tonight. As someone who's reviewed both systems, the technical superiority of your solution is undeniable." I blinked in surprise. "You've reviewed both systems?" "Jordan asked me to evaluate NextGen's platform last year when they were seeking additional funding," she explained. "And I've been using LifeSync's enterprise solution for faculty workflow management for the past 6 months, though I didn't know it was yours until today. The difference in architecture and user experience is substantial. This unexpected validation from a respected computer science authority, who also happened to be family, could prove invaluable." "Will Grace be at the meeting?" I asked Claire. Claire nodded grimly. "She's actually more upset than Will, if you can believe it. Keeps saying something about betrayal of family values and a wife's proper priorities." "Classic Grace, Aunt," Erica commented dryly. "Still living in a 1950s fantasy where women's ambitions are secondary to their husbands' egos." As we strategized for the evening ahead, I felt a strange calm descend. The months of anticipating this revelation, of imagining worst-case scenarios, had been more stressful than the reality unfolding before me. The secret was out. my achievement was recognized. And surprisingly, I had allies even within the Harrison family structure. Whatever happened tonight at the fortress, I would face it as my authentic self. No more diminishment, no more careful editing of my capabilities. The storm might rage, but I was no longer afraid of getting wet. The Harrison family home loomed against the darkening sky, its imposing colonial architecture reflecting the family's self-importance. As Claire, Aunt Erica, and I approached the front door, I could see figures moving behind the tall windows of Will's study, the traditional setting for family pronouncements and judgments. "Ready?" Claire asked, her hand poised to ring the doorbell. Nodded, clutching my portfolio containing the partnership proposals. As I'll ever be. The door opened before Claire could ring, revealing Grace Harrison in a perfectly tailored dress, her expression cool and evaluating as she took in our trio. "Erica," she addressed her sister with obvious surprise. "I wasn't aware you were joining us this evening." "Hello, Grace," Aunt Erica replied pleasantly. "When I heard about tonight's emergency family meeting regarding my former student's remarkable achievement, I couldn't stay away." Grace's lips thinned at the deliberate emphasis on remarkable achievement, but she stepped aside to let us enter. "Everyone's waiting in Will's study." The familiar walk through the formal entryway and down the hallway to Will's sanctuary felt different tonight. I was no longer the deferential daughter-in-law, but a business equal with achievements that rivaled or surpassed their own. The subtle shift in my posture and confidence must have been noticeable, as Grace kept glancing at me with growing consternation. Will's study was arranged like a corporate boardroom, with Will himself at the head of the long mahogany table. Jordan sat to his right, Tanner to his left. 2 empty chairs waited for Claire and me, while a third had apparently not been anticipated for Aunt Erica. "Erica," Will acknowledged with barely concealed annoyance, "this is a family matter." "And I'm family," she replied smoothly, pulling up an additional chair. "Grace's sister, Tanner and Jordan's aunt, and coincidentally, Eloise's former academic advisor at MIT. I believe I can offer valuable perspective on tonight's discussion." Will's expression darkened, but he didn't object further as we took our seats. I met Tanner's gaze briefly. He looked exhausted, caught between family loyalty and the reality of my achievement that he was still struggling to process. "Let's get to the point," Will began without preamble. "Today's announcement has created a significant situation for this family. Eloise has been operating a competitive business in secret, which has now directly undermined Tanner's position at NextGen and potentially damaged the company's market standing. The accusation hung in the air, direct and unvarnished. The old Eloise might have rushed to apologize, to smooth things over. But that version of me was gone. That characterization is inaccurate," I stated calmly. LifeSync and NextGen developed in parallel, addressing different market needs initially. The technologies evolved independently, and the market has made its determination based on performance metrics. Will's eyebrows rose at my direct contradiction. "Nevertheless, you deliberately concealed your work from your husband and this family, creating a situation that has now publicly embarrassed Tanner." "I built my company independently," I corrected. "There's a difference between privacy and concealment. A distinction without a difference," Grace interjected. "A wife should not keep such significant matters from her husband. It's a betrayal of trust and family values." Aunt Erica leaned forward. "Let's be clear about something. I've reviewed both LifeSync's and NextGen's technologies in a professional capacity. The architectural differences are substantial, indicating entirely independent development paths. There was no corporate espionage or betrayal here, just parallel innovation with one solution proving more effective than the other." Jordan nodded slightly, seeming to appreciate this objective assessment. Will, however, remained unmoved. "The issue isn't just about the technology," he insisted. "It's about loyalty and transparency." Eloise allowed Tanner to believe she was simply a supportive wife with a minor interest in coding, while secretly building a company that would ultimately compete with his. Actually, Tanner spoke for the first time, his voice surprisingly measured, I think I encouraged that belief. I never really asked about her work. I just assumed. The room fell silent as all eyes turned to Tanner. His admission, small but significant, shifted the energy in the room. In fact, he continued, meeting my eyes directly for perhaps the first time that day. I've spent the afternoon reviewing LifeSync's architecture. It's brilliant work. Work I never imagined Eloise was capable of, which says more about my limitations than hers. The simple acknowledgement, offered in front of his family, felt more meaningful than any private conversation we'd had. It wasn't a complete reconciliation, but it was an honest recognition of his role in our dysfunctional dynamic. Will looked stunned by his son's defection from the United Front. That doesn't change the fact that this situation has created significant business complications for NextGen. Actually, I said, opening my portfolio, it may have created an opportunity instead. I distributed copies of the partnership proposal to everyone at the table. This is a framework for strategic collaboration between NextGen and LifeSync through Vertex Technologies. Rather than competitors, our companies could become complementary solutions in the healthcare management space. Will glanced at the document with obvious skepticism. A convenient solution after the fact. Actually, Jordan interjected, already scanning the proposal with interest, this makes considerable business sense. NextGen's patient management systems integrated with LifeSync's workflow optimization could create a comprehensive healthcare solution neither company could achieve alone. Tanner was reviewing the technical specifications intently. The API integration points are well designed, he acknowledged. This would actually solve several architecture challenges we've been struggling with at NextGen. Will's expression soured as his expected allies found merit in my proposal. This doesn't address the fundamental issue of trust and family loyalty. Let's talk about loyalty, I said, meeting his gaze directly. For 6 years, I've attended every Harrison family dinner, supported Tanner's career, and listened to all of you dismiss my capabilities and interests as trivial. Not once did anyone at this table ask substantive questions about my work or consider that I might have valuable contributions beyond being a supportive wife. Grace stiffened. That's unfair. Eloise, we've always treated you as part of the family, as a specific kind of family member, I clarified. One whose role was to support, not to achieve. One whose success was measured by how well she facilitated the men's accomplishments. That's not true, Grace protested, though her eyes flickered. With uncertainty, isn't it? Aunt Erica challenged her sister. When was the last time you asked Eloise about her professional goals rather than her dinner party plans? When did any of you recognize that the woman who graduated top of her class at MIT might have ambitions beyond being Tanner's wife? An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. Claire nodded in agreement, while Jordan had the grace to look somewhat abashed. I built LifeSync in private because every time I expressed interest in technology, I was patted on the head and told how cute it was that I was trying to understand Tanner's world, I continued. I kept it separate not out of deception, but self-preservation, to create something that would be evaluated on its merits rather than dismissed as my wife's little project. Tanner winced visibly at hearing his own words reflected back. She's right, he admitted quietly. I did say those things, repeatedly. Will seemed taken aback by his son's continued defection from the United Front. That may be true, but it doesn't justify building a competing company in secret. I didn't. Set out to compete with NextGen, I explained. LifeSync began as a personal solution to workflow challenges. Its growth into an enterprise platform happened organically as clients recognized its value. The market overlap developed much later. Jordan, still reviewing the partnership proposal, looked up with newfound respect. The user metrics are impressive. 15 million active users, Adoption rates triple the industry standard. This isn't just a successful app, it's a market-defining platform. Which makes the partnership opportunity even more valuable for Next Gen, I pointed out. This isn't about choosing between family loyalty and business success. It's about recognizing that both can coexist if we move beyond outdated assumptions about who can contribute and how. Will was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable, as he processed this direct challenge to his worldview. Finally, he turned to Tanner. What do you think of this partnership idea, professionally speaking? The question represented a subtle but significant shift. Will was asking for Tanner's technical assessment, rather than his emotional response as a husband who felt betrayed. Technically, it's sound, Tanner replied after a moment's consideration. LifeSync's core algorithms would integrate well with our healthcare management systems. And he hesitated, then continued with obvious effort. Eloise's work on adaptive workflows is genuinely innovative. Next Gen would benefit from this partnership. It was perhaps the most direct professional acknowledgement Tanner had ever given me, offered in front of his family no less. The words seemed to cost him something, pride perhaps, or the remnants of his assumptions about our respective capabilities, but he spoke them nonetheless. Will nodded slowly, reassessing the situation with the pragmatism that had built his business empire. Jordan? From an investment perspective, this partnership creates more value than continued competition, Jordan confirmed. It's the rational business decision. Will turned to me, his expression still stern, but with a hint of reluctant reassessment. You've surprised us all, Eloise, not just with your technical achievement, but with your business acumen. It wasn't an apology or even a complete acceptance, but from Will Harrison, it was a significant concession. The family dynamics were shifting, however incrementally, as they adjusted to the reality of who I actually was rather than who they had assumed me to be. Thank you, I replied simply, neither gloating nor apologizing. I hope we can move forward in a way that benefits everyone, professionally and personally. Grace remained silent, her worldview perhaps too challenged by these events to form an immediate response. But the acute crisis had passed. The conversation was moving from accusations of betrayal to discussions of business logistics and integration timelines. As the meeting continued, I caught Tanner watching me with an expression I couldn't quite interpret, something between admiration and melancholy, as if seeing me clearly for the first time and mourning all the missed opportunities for genuine partnership over the years. The question of our marriage remained unresolved, hanging between us like an unfinished conversation. But tonight had established something crucial. I would no longer be just a housewife in the eyes of the Harrison family. I had claimed my place as a business equal, a technical innovator, and a woman whose achievements stood on their own merits. Whatever came next, it would be built on that foundation of truth rather than comfortable illusions. 3 months after the acquisition announcement that transformed my identity from just a housewife to tech CEO, I sat in my expanded office at LifeSync's new headquarters. The wall of windows offered a panoramic view of Boston's skyline, the same city where I'd hidden in plain sight for years, now the backdrop for my public success. The integration with Vertex Technologies had proceeded smoothly, with our team growing to over 100 employees. The partnership with NextGen was showing promising early results, with 3 major healthcare systems implementing our combined solution. On my desk sat the latest issue of Forbes with my face on the cover. The Stealth CEO, How Eloise Harrison Built a Tech Empire While Being Underestimated. The article had sparked a national conversation about women in tech and the persistent pattern of dismissing female capabilities. A conversation I was now actively participating in through speaking engagements and mentoring programs. A knock at my door interrupted my thoughts. Tanner stood in the doorway, looking both familiar and somehow different in the context of my professional space. The integration team is ready for our meeting, he said, his tone professional but with an undercurrent of the personal history between us. I nodded, gathering my materials. I'll be right there. Our marriage had survived, though not without profound changes. The night of the Harrison family confrontation had led to weeks of difficult conversations, couples therapy, and a fundamental renegotiation of our relationship. Tanner was making genuine efforts to see me as I truly was, to listen rather than explain, to appreciate rather than evaluate. Some days were better than others. We had moved out of our old home, too filled with the dynamics of our former relationship, and into a new space that belonged equally to both of us. Tanner had taken on a liaison role between NextGen and LifeSync, utilizing his technical expertise while adjusting to the reality that in some areas, particularly adaptive algorithms, my knowledge exceeded his. The Harrison family dynamics had shifted as well. Will had become a reluctant admirer of my business acumen, occasionally even seeking my perspective on investment opportunities. Grace remained more reserved, her worldview too entrenched for complete transformation, but she had stopped making comments about wives knowing their place. Claire and I had grown closer, bonding over shared experiences of being underestimated in professional contexts. She had recently been promoted to lead architect at her firm, inspired partly, she said, by watching me claim my full capabilities without apology. As Tanner and I walked to the conference room together, our steps in sync but with a new awareness of each other as complete individuals, I reflected on the journey that had brought us here. The path had been neither straight nor easy, but it had led to something authentic. A life where I no longer divided myself into acceptable fragments, where being a wife and being a tech innovator were not mutually exclusive identities. Ready? Tanner asked as we reached the conference room where both LifeSync and NextGen teams awaited us. Yes, I replied with the quiet confidence of someone who no longer needed to hide her capabilities. I'm ready. And I was, not just for this meeting, but for whatever came next in a life where I was finally, completely myself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.